I just still 5 minutes just to thank you. Thanks all the producer, of course, first of all, and all our friends from USA that are now connected. I'm Giulia, and I represent Vini del Piemonte, who is a consortium of more than 230 producers from Piedmont. Here today, we are for a different project that is called Top Cluster. It is a project in which we believe a lot, and it represents not only our associates, but all the best wineries from Piedmont. The wineries are selected by a partner that is different in every country, and we are very, very proud to confirm the collaboration that we have since a long time with Tom, who has selected the wineries according to the teams that he thinks are more valuable and interesting for USA professionals. So I just want to say thank you, first of all, for Tom for his precious work, and to the producer that relies on us, and thank you to all of you. And I hope you will enjoy these digital travels in this appointment dedicated to white from Piedmont and all the others that will become next. Thank you very much, and I wish you a nice moment, a nice webinar.
Grazie, Giulia. Are looking today at the subject of Piemonte whites, and we have 4 producers today. I will introduce the 3 that are logged on now. First, we have from Réva and Arnaldo, we have Stefano Almondo. Stefano, ciao. This is from the Giovanni Almondo winery, and let's get all 4 here. Stefano works with his brother Federico and his father Domenico, and they have a beautiful estate in Monta. We have another producer from Réva and Arnaldo who is not logged on yet, but should be here in a few minutes. That is Roberto De Monte from Malvira. Okay, also from Monforte d'Alba, we have Daniele Gaia, who many of you saw on the previous webinar. Daniele, ciao.
Ciao, hello everybody, ciao.
Okay. And we have Gabriele Oderda, ciao Gabriele, from Arnaldo, I always have trouble saying that, but Arnaldo Rivera. We'll talk today about his Machete. So thank you for joining us today. Let me see one more second if Roberto has signed on, and then we can get started here. Not yet. I don't know what the problem is, but I'm assuming he'll be on in a few minutes. So we'll get started with Stefano today. We're going to talk about whites, and we have a very nice group of producers today in wines, and I appreciate everybody tuning in today. We all know that Piemonte is known for its red wines, but I think it will surprise a lot of people as to how good the white wines are and how much white wine is made there. And I think a lot of this has been spearheaded over the last 30 to 40 years by producers in the Roero district with Arnaldo. And ironically, Stefano will talk about this, but ironically, probably the wine became very well known in the late 60s and early 70s because of a couple producers who are not in Roero. We won't mention them, but I'm sure people know who they are. But let's talk with you, first of all, about the Arnaldo grape. The story is that Arnaldo, first of all, the word itself in Italian, or in Piemontese dialect, it means, well, you tell us what it means. There's a lot of different definitions.
Yeah, Arnaldo was abandoned for a lot of time, especially during difficult time like the war or beginning of the 20th century. But the presence of this grape was testified by books and registers from 14th century. So it's a really native grape from Roero from many centuries. The first document probably is dated 1378. The etymology is discussed because the real etymology, in my opinion, is a name of a place, which is Renesio. But then Renesio is a hill. Malvira will tell about that.
Okay.
Anyway, it's the name of a place. It's like when you name Chardonnay, if it's imagine it's a name of a hill, it's the same thing. So Arnaldo was Renesio, Renexium, and then in Italian Renesio. There is also another etymology that is to little rascal in dialect. That means
okay.
This is much more popular in the last century as a technology.
There's Roberto Damonte from Malvira. Ciao, Roberto.
Ciao, Tom.
Thank you for joining us today. So I will get to you in a minute. We're talking now with Stefano Almondo about the origins of the word Arnese, about Roero Arnese. So. Roberto, who's joining you today?
Yeah, I was telling about the rediscovery of Arnese in the 60s by states in Langhe, but it's an indigenous grape from Roero, and it's now the basis of the economy of Roero, because now at least 6 million or 7 million bottles are produced in the Roero area of this grape.
That's a huge amount. Well, in Roero now, I'll have you on another webinar talking about Nebbiolo, Roero Rosso, but what's the percentage? It's overwhelmingly white, correct? It's overwhelmingly Arnese, correct?
I would say that 90% is Arnese, and
really, okay,
and 5-10% is Red Roero. It was not the case back in time in the 60s or in the 50s, but in the last 30 years, it's increasingly like that.
Okay. Let me ask Roberto now a little bit about Arnese. Get his microphone on here.
Ci stiamo organizzando.
Ok.
Io parlo solo italiano, quindi c'è mio figlio Giacomo, il nuovo winemaker di Malvira.
Okay.
Ciao Tom.
So, Giacomo, I understand that in the past, Arnese was pretty much a grape that was, this is back in the 1960s, before you were born, but it's a grape that was just sort of planted in between the rows of Nebbiolo, and it was kind of left for the birds to eat, that it wasn't taken very seriously. But in the late 60s, it started to become, so a few producers started to make it. Now, as Stefano said, there's millions of bottles produced every year. So what can you tell us about the last 30, 40 years with Arnese?
It's true what Stefano says. In past, Arnese was the kind of grape you made it just to drinking and eating at home. Also because there was some technical problem with Arnese in past. Because the Arnese in past was a bit fizzy, a bit sweet, because people have some problem to make a complete fermentation, a good fermentation. So sometimes starting to re-ferment inside the bottle. So in past year in the region was more popular Favorita, because Favorita were more easy to make it. But then when people understand it a bit more, how Arnese can be vinificated and what is the potential of Arnese, people are starting to move in their production to Arnese.
And we'll talk to both of you, in a few weeks when we talk about Nebbiolo as well. We'll also taste one of your Roero Rosso. But what is your percentage of production in terms of Arnese? How much?
Oh, we are in Malvira. We are more or less 50-50 between Nebbiolo and Arnese. Okay.
Well, let's start off with the first wine we're going to talk about today, and that is your 2019 Roero Arnese. If you have the bottle there, the Renesio.
Yeah.
Okay. Show the bottle there, Roberto. Perfetto. Okay. Great.
Renesio is one of the 3 single vineyards that we have, and the mainly difference that we have between the 3 is the kind of soil and the style of vinification. We are very proud of Renesio because Renesio is the historical place for the Arnese cultivation. Because the first document talking about Arnese was the payment of a tax to the noble family in 1478, and was still in Renesio place. Was not named Arnese, but was Vignetum Reneix, so was still the Latin name to try to show up the people how old is the cultivation of the Arnese in Renesio.
Okay, here's a photo of the vineyard. Tell us a little bit about the vineyard, and the elevation and the soils, and how old the vines are.
Renesio is one of the older places as a property, but also for the vines that we have in. as all the Roero region, there are always a pretty high % of sand inside of it. But there are also something with more carbonate part, chalky soil in that part, to give more mineral sensation to that kind of wine. Because normally we can see something more fruity if you are on a really strong sand, like Santissima Trinità. But on that one, you have something is a bit more mineral. Is more vertical kind of wine for that one.
Right. I tasted this wine earlier, and it's absolutely delicious, and I get aromas sort of classic, like melon and a little bit of pine, and then flowers like lilacs and things like that. And it's extremely clean, extremely fresh, and very nice acidity. So beautiful, beautiful wine.
And I think one of the cool things about that kind of wine is that has to be a good wine when it's young, but can be greater when it becomes older. Because it's a kind of Arnese, you can keep it easily for 8-9 years with no problem, also longer.
I would agree. I've tasted some examples of Roero Arnese from other producers and from you as well when I visited the last time. And yeah, we were having 7, 8, 10-year-old wines, and they were in very, very fine shape. And I don't think that people think about Roero Arnese aging, like a lot of white wines, but especially Roero, they just think it's a pleasant sort of, medium-bodied white to have with dinner or aperitif, but they really show great complexity as they get older.
Arnese is a kind of wine where you can make it a lot of different style, because you can go for something really easy. If you want to make a kind of Arnese, you can drink it easily in December or January, but it would be a kind of wine fruity, but with very short life. Working with more batonnage, a bit more structured kind of wine, and also go harvesting with a bit higher acidity than normal. You can have a kind of Arnese and take a good complexity. You need a bit longer to be ready, but then you have for sure a longer life.
Okay, let's talk about the second wine that you have today, and that's from 2018. Yes. When you're on that's the Riserva
Saglietto.
From Vigna Saglietto. Let me take this picture down.
On Saglietto, we had made it something a bit different with 2018. Also, we have a small change of packaging because we are changing a bit the style of the label. Is the first time that we are changing a bit the kind of aging, because the Saglietto have a part of its aging in wood barrel. Usually till the 16, we just go for a 450-liter barrel, so the double barrel. We stopped it in 17 to try to study a bit more what we have to do, try to make some change. And with 18, we are starting to make the aging with the Botte Grande in that part, on the 50% of the wine. The soil of Saglietto vineyard is more rich in sand than Arnese.
And these two vineyards, the Ranesio and the Saglietto, how old are the vines?
Saglietto is split in a few different parts, because with the 8...
L'anno in cui ci siamo sposati? No.
Saglietto is split in some different parts. The older one we planted in 81, and was the year of the marriage of Roberto. It was the first present Roberto made it to his wife.
Okay, that's a nice present.
Yeah.
One part of Saglietto.
Just one part to be sure, not all the vineyard.
Why don't you, could you move the bottle a little bit closer to you? It's blocking Roberto's face. Perfetto. Okay. Now we can see Roberto. So, Roberto, 2018 e 2019, due annate buone, sì?
Sì, anche 17 era un'ottima annata. 18 un'annata un pochino più fresca per i nostri vini, mentre invece 19 e anche 2020 abbiamo vini un pochino più carichi, diciamo, in generale.
Prego.
Sul Saglietto poi 18 è proprio cambiato lo stile che abbiamo su questo vino. Allora è un vino diverso dal 16, 15, 14, che erano già vini molto interessanti, adatti a lunghissima conservazione, ma questo, siccome l'abbiamo vinificato in queste botti grandi di rovere austriaco, ha ancora un taglio differente rispetto ai precedenti. Secondo noi ha un grande potenziale per il futuro, però è la prima volta che usiamo questi grandi fusti, quindi anche noi dobbiamo capire poi effettivamente come sarà l'evoluzione.
So I got most of that, so I'm going to need your help on translation, but I know both finishes have great potential for aging.
Yeah.
And tell me a little bit more about what Roberto said.
Okay, Roberto says that
Io bevo.
from the 18 and 19, Roberto says that the 18 will be a cooler climate, that part. In 19 and 2020 is a bit more warm, so we have a bit more higher intensity in our wine. Talking about the wine and the future of the wine, for the moment we think the kind of wine can have a great potential, but we are not that sure for this moment because it's the first time we made it. So we don't have a great knowledge about the Arnese in Botte Grande.
Okay.
Is wood from Austria on that part, so very dedicated kind. So can work very good with a kind of white wine that is not that such big as a Chardonnay or something similar.
Of course.
Because for us, the important things in the Roero for the Arnese, but also for the Nebbiolo, is playing on the balance. Because we always have a good equilibrium for acidity and pH, but sometimes we don't have that such a full body that we can risk it to cover with like a small new barrique or something similar. So we always have to make a good balance for the kind of wood we use in, and particularly also taking care about the maturation. We cannot let our grape become too mature in that part. So we always try to stay on a kind of Arnese is like 12.5 alcohol, 13 maximum, to try to find his best in acidity, also with a good structure.
That's nice to hear. We hear so many big whites, like you said, Chardonnay and other things, 13.5 and 14 alcohol, and it just,
yeah.
I don't think that would work with Roero Arnese. It's a delicate wine. I mean, when I don't mean delicate in terms of light, it just means that it's more aromatic and
exactly.
the wood. If you use too much wood, you're gonna spoil the wine because you're gonna lose all those wonderful perfumes. So this wine
also
is. Please,
sorry.
Prego.
Also the risk for to go through to full maturation on the Arnese, so arriving like in 14 degrees, something similar. We always are risking to lack in acidity, because for the Arnese it's really easy to dropping down the acidity.
Okay, let's switch over to Stefano. Stefano, let me ask you about, we get a couple pictures up of some of your vineyards for a second here. So tell us about 2018 and 19. The two wines we hear from you today are the Bricco di Ciliegie and the Le Rive di Bricco di Ciliegie from 2019. But tell me first about 2019, about what a vintage, about the qualities of that vintage.
2019 is absolutely a great vintage because we had the right amount of rain during summer and also in spring, and this is more and more crucial for the quality of the vintage because the warm temperature is always there. We need to avoid the African stream, first of all, and second, to have the right amount of water. And in 19 we had those conditions. In my two wines share the same terroir, and it's a very particular kind of, because it's very high in altitude. It's average 390 meters, 400 meters, and this avoid the 40 degrees Celsius African stream. There we have 37 maximum, and also in winter it's very warm. So in that place, we avoid the extreme of the season, and we have a very precocious maturation. This is one of the key of this wine. Always a good freshness, and the maturity is always precocious. In this way, all the vintage, every vintage is avoid the extremes, as I told.
When you talk about the African stream, you talk about the winds coming up from
Yeah, in Italian it's alta pressione africana, high pressure, African high pressure.
All right.
Yeah, we are experimenting this more and more in Italy, also in the north. And this is a problem, of course, because we're not used to face this problem. But you can do well if you have the right amount of water and you have high parts, so high in altitude, to avoid the extremes, no? Also, another important feature of this place where we have these wines is the soil. The soil is like an exception facing normal Roero. Roero is sabbie di Asti, sabbie astiane. While in this plot we have Villa Franchiano kind of soil. I show you, this is clay, this is pure chalk, and this is acidic sand. These three components are the three components of the Villa Franchiano period. It's another geological period compared to Sabbie di Asti. Sabbie Astiani is 3 million years ago, while Villa Franchiano is more recent, is 300,000-400,000 years ago. But the most important thing is that it's there is a great component of clay and calcium. And this gives a very distinctive profile to the wine, which means lower pH, vertical straight feeling, freshness, aging capacity, not the typical fruity note of Arnais, not the typical roundness, but on the other side of the description, so much more vertical.
Okay, I'm going to put up a picture of the Bricco de Ciliegie. And if you could tell me a little bit about the vineyard and we're looking at here. Let's say find the vineyard here. Sorry. Here we are. Here we are.
Okay. You can see it's quite a savage, wild profile of landscape.
And how old are these vines?
Allora, the oldest part is 50 years old, and the 50 years old part go in the Golden Cap, the Rive, and it's the plot that you see in the right part of the picture. And this is also the first vineyard that my family had for Arnais. The Cascina, their Cascina was right down the valley. You can see a part of the house. In the 60s, they sold the Cascina and went where the cellar is now. But that vineyard remained in our property, of course. And so the red strip, the little part cultivated by hand, no tractor, there we do our Rive selection. It's a vineyard selection. All the rest of the hill is 35, 40 years old and go in the normal Bricco delle Ciliegie. The part is 405 meters and it's a very particular kind of soil. I showed you the calcar, the acidic sand, the clay. You can see also the landscape surrounding. It's quite, there are forests, there are orchards, typical Roero landscape, especially in the north border, very savage, very wild.
Okay. Yeah, you're in Monta, which is all the way in the north of Roero, correct? Is there that much of a difference from what your vineyards or your climate is from where Roberto is?
It's quite different, especially the north part, there is more clay, and it's another geological period, so it's Villa Franchiano. I would say it's less cultivated. There are less vineyards. The few vineyards that are there are from many centuries, but many forests are still present, and luckily no one is touching them.
Well, the wines are lovely. Now I get the first one, the Bricco de Ciliegie, the pine. I also get melon that I get in the other typical Arnais, but I also get a little spearmint in yours. And now you use just a little bit of barrique in maturing these wines, correct?
Yeah, correct. 98% is in stainless steel. We have 20 barriques, not new oak, but third, fourth passage. We find that this had a bit of complexity. So it's a tradition that my father started in the 80s, and we continue this tradition of adding a little bit of barrique aged Arnais. It's not new barrique, so it's quite neutral. It just had a shade of complexity to the wine.
And as far as aging these wines, 19 is, as we talked about, and 18 are both vintages that have great promise of cellar potential. When would you say would be a peak? I know it's different for everybody as when they enjoy their wines, but how long can you hold these wines?
19 is a great vintage. In my opinion, the top period in drinking is in 5 years, and up to 10, 12 years. We have just made a vertical test in 13 and 16 vintages were absolutely perfect shape, better than the newer releasing. So it means that, in my opinion, 5, 6 years, it's absolutely necessary for showing all the potential of this site. Yeah.
Right. I had a comment here from a friend who's in the business here in Chicago, Beverly Malin. She is the importer from Malvira, and she mentioned that she has one of their wines from 2010. She's still selling, and she says it's in great shape. So there's a wine that's 10 years old and is drinking beautifully. So the last comment I want to make about Arnais, and what I find is that, you know, of course, these wines have very good acidity, especially these vintages, 18 and 19, which promotes freshness, promotes structure, promotes, you know, cellar potential. A lot of, I think, Americans, and maybe people in other countries as well, sometimes you say wine has very good acidity, and they're a little bit nervous about that. They think it maybe is a little bit sharp or, you know, or tart or just, you know, and I find that the acidity with Arnais, it's not like the acidity with certain grapes from, let's say, Friuli, which are very high in acidity. This, I think, is a much more pleasing, softer, rounder acidity, as with many Piemontese whites, compared to things like Friuli and other parts of Italy. And I think that's a real plus for selling your wine and getting new consumers to, you know, to try these things. Would you agree?
Absolutely.
Okay. Roberto, what are your thoughts on that?
Come? Sorry?
I wanted to know Roberto's thoughts on the acidity in Arnais, because I think it's very good acidity, but it's not as high as whites from Friuli, for example. And I think it's a softer, rounder style of acidity, and it's more enjoyable to a larger group of consumers.
Allora, ti chiesto cosa ne pensi dell'acidità dell'Arnais, perché non è così alto come vini friulani o cose simili, e quindi essendo un pochino più bassa c'è la possibilità di un consumo, diciamo, più diffuso.
Ma tante volte si dà troppo l'importanza a un elemento che è l'acidità. Il vino è sempre una questione di equilibrio di tantissimi elementi. Quindi a volte magari anche con un po' meno di acidità, ma con altre sostanze presenti in quantità maggiore o minore, tipo i flavoni, si può avere un'ottima conservazione del vino anche senza avere acidità altissime. La prossima volta che vieni giù possiamo provare questo, è un Renesio 91 che è ancora in ottime condizioni.
Okay.
Okay. Roberto, talking about the acidity, it turned more that people very often look at more just one component of the wine. He says is more important looking at the complexity of the wine. Also because sometimes you can have it a wine with a lower acidity, with a better link, a better combination with the pH or a part of the aromatic sensation. You can have a great bite in the wine also without a really high acidity. And if you have a good relation between acidity, pH, alcohol, and a good part for the aging, so you have a good balance, you can make a great aging also with not that high acidity on the wine.
That's
poi anche la vendemmia in Piemonte è tutta fatta a mano, quindi fra i primi Arnais che raccogliamo e gli ultimi quest'anno sono passati quasi 4 settimane, quindi l'uva è diversissima E poi è importante anche fare dei blend sulla stessa vigna fra le prime che abbiamo raccolto e le ultime, per avere magari più potenza dagli ultimi, ma più freschezza dalle prime uve.
Okay, so I know he says it's all, the harvest is all by hand.
Yeah, exactly.
Go ahead.
I'd say it's good for quality, but we take a longer time.
Right.
So
About 4 weeks, he said, right?
we can learn exactly. With this year, for example, we're taking like 4 weeks to harvest in all the part of Veronese. So we have the possibility to blending the first part with the central on the late part. So on that way, you can make a more interesting kind of balance on the wine. So you can have a part of the power of the wine from the late one, but still keep it a good aromatic and acidity part from the early one.
Okay.
So dividing the harvest, you can make it probably a better job than go for a single harvest on that kind of wine.
Anche in Piemonte è anche molto importante, è tutta una viticoltura di collina, quindi è importante l'esposizione. Quindi lo stesso cru, magari abbiamo versante est o sud o nord o west. Qui le uve sono diversissime, quindi si può giocare anche molto su quello.
So yeah, it's important in Piemonte with all of the hillside viticulture to get the right exposition for the grapes, correct?
It has more than the right. Was good to have it different exposition. So inside the single vineyard, you can have 3 different steps of growing, like for Renesio, because Renesio turning around the hill.
Cioè nord e sud, Arneis.
So in that way, you can have it a different kind of maturation, different style, and is naturally made at the blend.
Okay. Perfetto. Grazie, Roberto, for everything. Let's move on now to my friend Daniele Gaia, and we're going to talk about a grape that's not all that common, or at least that well known in Piemonte. And you have your bottle there, this beautiful label.
Me too.
White wine that you call Grey. And what is that? Is that a little macaw, or what is that on the label? That's what
The parrots.
The parrot. Okay.
Yeah.
Like a macaw. Okay. And you call this wine Grey, and this is a blend of Sauvignon Gris and Sauvignon Blanc, correct?
Right. This is a big pride for us, because I think this kind of wine, it represents very well the spirit of our estate. It is a young estate created in 2011. We always are looking for a new challenge or something new to do. The original project of our estate was to produce only autochthonous varieties of Lang. So in the beginning, our idea was to produce Dolcetto, Barbera, Nebbiolo, and of course, Barolo.
Okay. I'm going to put up a picture of your vineyards in Monforte. I didn't mention you're in Monforte d'Alba, which is in the Barolo zone, and it's towards the south. So here's a shot of your vineyards.
Okay. Yes, perfect. You can see there in the low part on the left our not only our cellar but also our resort with the restaurant and the rooms, and all the vineyards on your right are part of the property of Réva. Especially in this case are Nebbiolo, very close to the border, and in the low part, close to the hazelnut plant, is Barbera. So this is a very beautiful photos of our property. The creation of this wine was really like a Luna Park for us. We heard for the first time about the existence of the Sauvignon Gris only 2012. Nobody of the 3 winemakers that are now in Réva, me, Gianluca, and Gabriele, heard about these grapes before. We heard about this grape, this variety, the Sauvignon Gris, from another producer that have his estate in Diano d'Alba, so outside from Barolo area, in Alta Langa area. And he would like to sell this vineyard because he was not using the Sauvignon Gris for a production of wine. Too low quantity of grape for hectare, sometimes difficult to arrive at a very good maturation because the maturation of the Sauvignon Gris is very late. So we approached the vineyards for the first time in 2012, like a pure experiment. We bought 100 cases of grape, and we produced 4 barriques. So it was really a pure experiment. It was 100% Sauvignon Gris. The result was amazing. We find some flavors, some character absolutely not usual for wines of our area. So from this first touch, we decide to buy the vineyard and start to invest on this kind of grape. And always from this 2012, we take also some bud from these original plants to create a new vineyard that now we planted in Monforte d'Alba, very close to the resort, but saving the same DNA and the same character of the original plant. This was the first touch we had with this kind of grape. For 3 years, 2012, 13, and 14, we produced the wine in purity, so 100% Sauvignon Gris. Okay. Every year we worked better on the flavors of this grape that is absolutely amazing. You can imagine that is a wine that have its origin in the Loire area in France. Okay. So the flavors are more rich of fruit and flavors than not the classic Sauvignon that you can find in Italy. So this was the very interesting part for us. But for all the 3 vintage, we find also in the 14, we find too low acidity. So this is why starting from 2015, we decide to blend this grape with a small percentage, normally is 20, maximum 30% of Sauvignon Blanc, the classic okay. Sauvignon that you can find all over the world. But
let me ask you,
please.
Besides the difference in acidity, how would you compare Sauvignon Blanc with Sauvignon Gris?
Oh, are 2 completely different worlds. Sauvignon Blanc, especially in the position where we have the vineyard, that is the low part of Ravera hill in Novello, give you a very high quantity of acidity. So the quantity of tartaric acid inside at the grape is extremely high. Sometimes also too much, a little bit, if take alone. The Sauvignon Gris is completely different. It's a very low acidity. You need to find a perfect balance for the harvest between the maturation that I told before is very late. Sometimes it's also later than some red grape in our area. And sometimes to arrive at the perfect maturation of the flavors, you lose a percentage of acidity. So to create this blend, give us finally the possibility to have a wine in the same time extremely special, unique, different from all the other white wine produced in Laghe area, but also very fresh and drinkable. Okay. This is not a blend made with the grape. This is a wine produced with 2 separate vinification. Right. The Sauvignon Blanc, that in that case, 2018 is 25%, is produced only in still, very fast fermentation, absolutely no maceration, and stay only in still, because from the Sauvignon Gris, we don't want to add too much flavors to the wine, but it's important to create an acidity in the base to add freshness to the wine. The Sauvignon Gris have a different vinification. We make normally 12 hours of maceration, cold maceration, to have more extraction of flavors from the skin. Okay. Then 4 or 5 days of fermentation. At the end of the fermentation, only the Sauvignon Gris go to barrique or tonneau, very old, used, and stay there for 100, 120 days. And we make the batonnage normally every 2 or 3 days, so stay on the lees. Is very Burgundy style. Working in this way and moving very often the leaves inside to the barrique, we have the possibility to have a better extraction of all the minerality that is the main character of the Sauvignon Gris, and fix this character to the juice, to the wine. Only at the end of this process, we create the final blend between the Sauvignon Blanc and the Sauvignon Gris. And then our way is wait always a little bit more to arrive on the market, because it's a wine extremely rich and needs a little bit time in the bottles also to arrive at the maximum of this expression. So in the past, we bottle normally the wine in January. Last year we moved to April. Our idea will be, if possible, in 1 or 2 years to arrive on the market in September with this wine. So give almost 1 year more of aging before to arrive on the market.
Okay. With the 2018, how many bottles did you produce?
Finally, we start to have also good production because also the new vineyards start to be in production with quality. So from 2017, we up and we arrive around 13,000 bottles per year, 13, 14.
Let me ask you another question. Since this is such a distinctive white wine from Piemonte, and since I'm sure that most of the people that are watching today or that will watch on the recording has been to Piemonte and of course have enjoyed, you know, white wines and red wines with local cuisine, what would you recommend with the Grey?
You know, it's a wine extremely extremely rich. So I think have no fear also to approach something like a pasta, but with very important ragu or maybe mushrooms, or is also not a big challenge to try with the meat, because the composition, the characterization and the texture of this wine is very important. So it's not a white wine normally think it like a white wine for aperitif, so to eat, to drink very easier also with something finger food, but is a wine a little bit more rich and important. To give more importance to the wine, from the 19 that will be on the market from January 2021, we decide to make the aging period a little bit longer. So from 4 months, we move to 6 months, but in big barrel, Slavonian oak instead the Barrique and the Tonneau.
Okay, great, thank you. Now let's move on to Gabriele Oderda, who's been very patient sitting there waiting for his turn, and now it's his turn. So he will talk about Nascetta. We talked about Arnese, which sort of got a lot of people interested in white wine in Piemonte, and that's been going on for the last 30 or 40 years. But now Nascetta has been a very, very popular wine, especially with many, many sommeliers and wine buyers and restaurant wine buyers. Tell us, first of all, the winery you work for is Terra del Vino, which is in Castiglione Faletta, which is a cooperative. But tell us about this special project, these wines that are labeled, can never say it, Arnaldo Rivera. Tell us all about that project.
You can practice more and more, then at the end it comes. Arnaldo Rivera. Okay. Who is Arnaldo Rivera? Arnaldo Rivera was the founder of Terra del Barolo in 1958.
Terra del Barolo, my mistake, I'm sorry.
It happens.
Okay.
So when we talk about Terra del Barolo, we talk about the only one direct co-op in Barolo. That means grower owners, 300 families, passionate growers, owner for the 85% of less than 2 hectares each families, 5 acres each family. So that's a multitude of small vineyard and an heritage that is quite unique and quite strongly related with the culture of wine growing in Langhe and Barolo especially. We have hills that are hyper subdivided in small plots, and that is in the end the richness of the diversity and of the culture of each family and generations that kept vineyards and viticultural skills. In 2017, we launched a new experience called Arnaldo Rivera in honor of our founder that passed away in 1987, but was a great forerunner of Barolo wine. He was mayor of Castiglione Falletto for almost 40 years. He was an elementary school teacher, great man of social skills, and he, together with the first 21 growers, founded what is still today the only one winery with a direct cooperative system. So we keep farming the land and making the wine in only one winery. we are kind of state as the largest number of growers are with us for generation. They already are second and third generation growers. Then we have only one place where we vinify the wine. We make wine only by our own grapes. And by 2017, with Arnaldo Rivera, we isolated the best plots and the best, let's say, exposure, old vines,
okay.
about half a hectare for each grower. Only 30 growers in the Arnaldo Rivera project, and from that we produce a range of wines that are mainly focused on Barolo, but also on native grape varieties. And then I stop. I just would like to remind that Terra del Barolo has always produced only traditional wines, so local varieties
Okay.
and traditional appellation of land. This
Right.
is a strength from our winery from day one.
I'm going to put up a picture of one of the vineyards you work with where you source some of your nascetta.
Absolutely.
But here's a picture of the grape itself. People haven't seen it. There's nascetta.
It's a nascetta has a very distinct color, very intense yellow turning to gold with some bronze drops on the berries, quite recognizable.
Okay, and you mentioned that you're more famous for your Barolo, and we'll talk about that in a few weeks in another webinar. But when did you first start to make nascetta? There's another view of one of your nascetta vineyards. Tell us what.
So first of all, I needed to remind that a strong representation of our growers comes actually from Novello, and they are long-time growers of nascetta. Arnaldo Rivera Nascetta first vintage is a 2016 that we jealously keep in our cellar, a few bottles in order to create a collection and an historic library of old vintages. As many people know, Nascetta has a natural potential for improving with the time.
The current vintage we're going to talk about today is 2018.
Exactly.
But tell us a little bit about that vintage. The wine is very, very lovely.
Nascetta is, I feel a little bit surrounded because I have 2 Roero producers, but 3 Roero guys around me.
Okay, all right.
So actually, we needed to pay homage to Arnaiz because it's a white wine in the land of reds that made the history, and probably open also the way for other great wines experiences. Nascetta is one of the smallest appellation in Langhe, probably in Piedmont. There is a official menzione that was recognized in 2010. So this year is the 10th anniversary of the Menzione Geografica Comune di Novello, where actually the Nascetta was born, and we have a bibliography of more than 200 years talking about this variety. First of all, Nascetta is an incredibly versatile variety. Before talking about vintages and vinification, we need to introduce a little bit what is the Nascetta, as probably many people don't know. In Novello, we are only 12 growers now bottling Nascetta. There will be other 2 actually, but in the association of Nascetta di Novello that was born in 2014 and relaunched this year, 2020, we are 12 producers struggling for really presenting to the world and making Nascetta accessible in as many markets as possible, as we think it's really something special. Is the only native white grape in the land of Barolo.
Right.
So quite a strong message and identity.
Okay, I just put up a photo of the headquarters of your producers.
Exactly.
No.
When borders and flights will be again possible, we invite all the people to visit, as it's a super fancy atmosphere looking towards the Alps, the Monviso. The building is located on a little road on a corner with an amazing view and all the nascetta available to taste. So people need to put it on the map.
Right. And in terms of making this wine, you do not use any oak, correct? It's just all steel?
I must say that with the team here, Arnaldo Rivera looks for basically learning to understand the variety. Nascetta was rediscovered in the mid-90s, so has not such a long history as Arnese, for example, or as Cortese, or even maybe Favorita. We are really at the beginning. But what I would like to underline is that together with all the producers, we feel like a family. We have a lot of exchanges between each other. We feel strong together, and experimentation are different. There are people using maybe some oak, some others trying to macerate a little bit more on the skins. As it is our school, our idea is to make, first of all, a great white wine. So to make a great white wine, we need to be, first of all, extremely precise in the vineyards. So Nascetta di Novello Arnaldo Rivera is actually a selection of the best bunches that we pick every year. Among the different plots, now we have 5 different plots where we do the selection. We have one old plot entered in 1963 that represents an incredible cultural and historical heritage for Nascetta, because it's a white plot nestled in like 5 different rows, nestled in among Barbera and Nebbiolo, in the middle of Ravera, looking towards Panerole hamlet, full south.
Okay, so this is in the Ravera vineyard, the famous vineyard in Novello. So, and I'm amazed to hear that in 1963. That must be one of the oldest plots of Nascetta in the.
Among the oldest, there is one older, but it's among the oldest ones.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Something that I would like to remind is that differently from the most common grape or international grape varieties, Nascetta has a particularity. It's a very, very pure in its DNA nowadays, as it didn't undergo large clonal selections or identification of clones in nursery. As the grapes the grape variety almost disappeared in the last century, there is almost no intensive studies on the rootstock and on the variety. So most of the vineyard that you will find are pure, essential Nascetta from all the clones, the best performing clones, but is such a soft and delicate selection on the original wine. So this is really the possibility to get in touch with something historical and very, I would say, fable, delicate. So we need to keep to invest in the research and as much as possible make the wine accessible to more and more consumers in order to sustain this experience of native wine.
I have to tell you, I always enjoy talking to someone who's very passionate about what they do. And you are very, very passionate. So it makes for a very entertaining webinar as well, but I appreciate that. And how many bottles of this did you produce in 2018?
Every year, we are around between 6,000-7,000 bottles a year. It's a very small selection. In particular, we use a one only stainless steel tank where we vinify and age this wine. We don't do malolactic fermentation. We exclusively age sur lit for 8 months with 1 weekly batonnage. And then in the first day, the first half of June, the following year, we bottle the wine and we will release the wine on the market 1 year later. We do this for 2 reasons. First of all, because we feel lucky to have the possibility to store the wine properly in our cellar in a cool and dark place, leaving the Nascetta the possibility to improve and evolve, ripe properly in the bottle. And second, because everyone talks about the possibility and the quality of Nascetta to improve with a few years. So we would like to provide to the consumers the possibility to enjoy this wine at least when it's not maybe ready, but starts to deliver something more. Nascetta is extremely aromatic in the first 6 months to the first year of life in the bottle, reminding almost a Moscato as its flavor. But then, following the second, third year, the Nascetta become more complex, broader, with hints of flint and extremely savory. So, as Mr. Roberto of Malvira was mentioning before, acidity in the Nascetta is not so high, is not the only element that characterize a great white. We have sapidity, we have a terpenic compound that really makes this wine something special and interesting, unique.
Okay. Very briefly, I tasted the wine. I loved it. It's very clean, very fresh. They get some of the same melon and pear aromas you get in other white wines in the area, but I also get a little touch of chamomile, which I thought was very, very nice. What foods would you pair with this?
We believe that Nascetta is a perfect with seafood. We have a côté, a cider that is savory, persistent, long-lasting in mouth. There is not a high acidity. We are around 5.60, but globally the wine is extremely fresh, but also can support more structured, dense plates as risotto with a Parmigiano dressing, nice pasta as well, with any kind of canapé, entree, amuse-bouche. Nascetta is great. It's great also with cheese. Maybe not so those ripe blue aged cheeses, but with some fresh milk, cheap cheeses is perfect even at the end of the meal.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate everyone's help today. Let's see if we can get Julia up here if you want to ask anything.
Yes. I just want to say hi to everybody. It was really interesting, and I hope all American friends has enjoyed as well. So just to say thank you, and thank you, Tom, of course.
Thank you again. And we will see, Daniela, you've been on 2 of these now, so you're through, but no, you can come back if you'd like to, of course. But we will see most of you in an upcoming webinar on Nebbiolo. Stefano and Roberto will be talking about your Royale Rosso, and Gabriele will be talking about your beautiful Barolos, your single vineyard Barolos, which are the heart of your project. So thank you all again.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so
Bye,
much.
see you soon.
Ciao a tutti.
Bye.
Thank you. Grazie.